don't do this in America. So anytime there's any kind of flashpoint that reflects that, people get upset, and then he does better. So, so yes, this is good technically in terms of justice and what is the right and fair and wise thing to do. It's good for him. Is it the best thing for Trump? Politically, I don't know.
Yeah. So Trump still has all of this hanging over him. I mean, there are numerous cases. There's a sentencing pending. There's potential federal cases to go yet on the documents no, I guess the documents is probably
that's on appeal.
It's on appeal.
Yeah, okay. And then we've got the election interference case as well. Jack Smith has got both of those. But at the same time, the decks seem to have been cleared now for just a real battle over policy between now and November, with the centerpiece of that happening next Tuesday with this very first meeting on the debate stage between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. But she still gets to say he's a convicted felon.
And that she's a former federal prosecutor. I mean, that's the line that they've been setting up this whole time, that she's the one who enforces the law, he's the one who breaks the law. But he's not going to have to be stuck in a courtroom, and he's not going to have to face a sentence before you get to November 5th. And as we've talked about, early ballots are starting to trickle out. Early voting is starting. And so
although they delayed it in North Carolina.
In North Carolina, they did. And that's another
that was
legal
supposed
battle.
to happen today.
Right. That's another legal battle that's going on as RFK Jr. is trying to get himself off that ballot now. So, listen, he's not going to be dragged to sitting in a courtroom. Of all of these trials, he's had to go through this one. Now, he's had some business trials. He's had the E. Jean Carroll. But the one that seemed, all the accusations of being very political in nature with Alvin Bragg. And remember, Alvin Bragg didn't object when the Trump team came forward and said, we think this needs to be pushed past the election. Had Judge Merchan not agreed to do that, it would have looked like, listen, both parties are asking for this. He risks looking political if he moved forward.
Yeah.
Carrie, I'm finding it interesting. I still haven't seen an immediate reaction from the Trump camp through Trump social or whatever it may be. But perhaps they saw this coming, Carrie.
Or maybe they didn't. Judge Merchan hasn't exactly. I don't think he's been particularly fair towards Donald Trump in all of this. So they may be just shocked and deciding how they want to go about messaging this. But with respect to something Shannon was just saying with Alvin Bragg, this is a DA who lets a lot of people go free when they commit crimes. This is, and Donald Trump here would be a first-time nonviolent offender. And it was wise of them to put it all on the judge. Oh, yeah, it's up to you, Judge, whatever you want to do. They don't want that on them. But I was always wondering how the sentencing was going to play out, because it always just struck me as inconsistent with how they run law and justice in New York City, given that there doesn't seem to be a lot of punishment for similar crimes, or certainly not jail time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after the election. But gosh, the election, the stakes just got even higher now, didn't they?
So let's talk. And we discussed this with Jonathan Turley a moment ago, and that is that between now and the November 26th new date for sentencing, and we don't know if it'll happen November 26th, depending on the outcome of the election, might not happen at all. But there's also that big decision that Judge Merchan is going to make on the motion to dismiss the case and vacate the conviction, based on the Supreme Court decision regarding presidential immunity. So Merchan's got a couple of things to consider here.
It's a really big one. And this is the same thing that Judge Chutkan's going to be weeding through in the federal case, like what survives, what doesn't. We saw that Jack Smith came up with a whole new indictment after the immunity decision from the Supreme Court, trying to weed out what he felt like the court would object to, but keep enough that he said supports the charges he has. Carrie and I, again, sat through that trial, saw Judge Merchan making decisions all the time. I don't think if I'm the Trump team, I hold out a lot of hope that he's going to say, you're right, the immunity decision from the Supreme Court completely dissembles this New York case. I think Carrie and I would be both
But don't forget, Jack Smith would have loved to have said that as well, but he had to completely rewrite his indictment in a way that disassociates Donald Trump from the office of the presidency at a time when he's still president. So, I mean, they can make whatever case they
Alvin Bragg
want.
may feel like they can do that without the Hope Hicks and some of the other things.
Yeah, I don't see Judge Merchan going for the immunity argument personally. I never have. But look, the stakes for Donald Trump could not be higher. If he wins this election, most of these cases go away. He gets rid of the special counsel. That's half of those cases. And then the rest of the Georgia, we'll see what even happens there. That's just a disaster in general. And then we'll see what happens on the classified docs on appeal. It's certainly interesting. But again, that'll be directly related to his Department of Justice. So these things pretty much go away, more or less, other than Judge Merchan's case in New York right now. Now, if he loses, It's a pretty serious situation for him.
He's not just fighting for his political life in this election. It's really his legal and potentially his freedom, too.
Yes.
All right. Stand by if you would. Lots more to come.
Interesting segue from Shannon there, because as I continue to read through the judge's letter here, we're going to bring in Nate Foy, who's reporting on this live out of Lower Manhattan referencing the protection of his constitutional rights. The judge writes, unfortunately, we're now at a place in time that is fraught with complexities, rendering the requirements of a sentencing hearing, should one be necessary, difficult to execute. Thus, in accordance with certain of the grounds submitted by defendant and the reasons for adjournment provided by the people, coupled with the unique time frame that this matter currently finds itself in, Nate, the decision on the motion and the imposition of sentence will be adjourned to avoid any appearance, however unwarranted, that the proceeding has been affected by or seeks to affect the approaching presidential election in which the defendant is a candidate. Nate, the latest from you in Lower Manhattan.
Hey, Sandra. Yeah, Judge Merchan definitely sensitive in this ruling with the politics that are clearly front and center in this case, at least the political impacts. This is, at least right now, a temporary political win for former President Donald Trump, as the sentencing for his Manhattan criminal case will now happen after the November election on November 26th. And then 2 weeks prior to that, Judge Merchan on November 12th will rule on whether or not his conviction should be thrown out because of that Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that presidents are immune from official acts that they take in office. But reading from his decision that just came out here in the past few minutes, this is not a decision the court makes lightly, he writes, but it is a decision which, in this court's view, best advances the interest of justice. Now, it's important to note that the Manhattan DA's office did not object to a sentencing delay here. And just for background, Trump was found guilty of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records related to defrauding the American public in the 2016 presidential election. And he has issues with several parts of this case. And Judge Merchan wrote about Trump's concerns, saying in his decision today that the concerns that Trump has regarding this case were not the reason for the delay of the sentencing, but rather it was simply the political ramifications of how this would play out. Earlier today at Trump Tower, Trump spoke about this case. He called it a disgrace. He said that the 34 felony counts essentially came from nothing. He argued that his former attorney, Michael Cohen, is responsible for the payments that he made and facilitated so that the money could eventually get to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Trump had maintained during the trial that he trusted his lawyer and that the payments that he made to Michael Cohen were in fact legal expenses. But in total, in the end there, he was found guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records. The sentencing now will happen November 26th after the election. That's the big takeaway here, Sandra. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Nate Foy on that for us. Nate, thank you.
All right, back to Jonathan Turley now, who joins us again by phone. Professor, I got a couple of questions for you, because we were talking with Carrie and with Shannon about this, and that is the motion to vacate the conviction, which is set to be decided on November the 12th because of the Supreme Court case on presidential immunity. First of all, how do you think Judge Merchan will rule on that? Shannon and Carrie seem to think that he wouldn't go for it. And secondly, this is a state case, not a federal case. Could Trump pardon himself? You can't pardon on a state case because you're a federal official. However, the way that Alvin Bragg bootstrapped this thing, the underlying crime was a federal crime. So could he, in fact, pardon himself? Two questions there.
Well, they're both very good questions. Starting with the second one first, no, I don't believe he could pardon himself because it is a state question. And I think that what may happen is that Trump is obviously going to litigate this question of the bootstrapping, and saying that they not only used privileged information, but this really went well beyond the confines of this law. I've always been critical of this law, not this law, this case, because I do believe that it was politically motivated, and I believe that Mershon made reversible errors in this case, and all those have to be addressed in the course of the appeal. I also want to know one other factor, and then we get to the first question, and that is there's an interesting dynamic here with the timing that may actually work in a strange way to help Mershon not impose jail time. If Donald Trump is elected president, Mershon could use that fact to say that the court is aware of the complications of a person who must carry out the duties of his office now as the president-elect. And it could support his not imposing jail time. In some ways, it would help him take that cup from his lips and say that I'm going to impose other types of penalties. So there's a curious aspect to all this timing that might make it easier for Mershon not to impose an actual prison sentence.
Yeah, still just trying to. The reaction from the Trump side, interesting. We have not seen any yet, Jonathan. One might assume that they could be quite stunned by this.
Well, this is not what you've come to expect from Judge Mershon. I sat in that courtroom, and quite frankly, I was baffled by many of his decisions. I felt that he made some rulings that were clearly in error. He ruled largely in favor of the prosecution and against the former president. That's the reason I think that there are aspects of this trial which are really screaming for appellate review. But this is the correct decision. I mean, he not only has a lot of work to do because this is a very difficult question about whether the Supreme Court decision will invalidate this conviction. I've always believed that he would ultimately uphold the conviction. But he can't just do that with a wave of his hand. He's going to have to explain why clearly privileged evidence that he let into the trial was not determinative, was not essential to any conviction. And I think that's the argument that he's likely to embrace.
All right, Jonathan, thank you very much. If you could stand by with us, we're going to bring in former Deputy White House Chief of Staff Karl Rove. Karl, please do give us your thoughts and reaction to this news.
Well, first of all, it's a reasonable decision. I think that even the judge figured out that it would be enormously disruptive to the country and reflect badly on the judiciary if he attempted to insert himself into the middle of the final stages of a presidential campaign. And I also agree with the notion that was offered up by several other of your analysts, and that is that if he had gone forward with this, it would have, ironically enough, served the interest of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has risen in the polls the more that people have reacted negatively to his treatment in the courtroom. And if the judge had gone ahead with this, it could have easily been the October surprise. That is to say, he would have potentially gone after Donald Trump in his verdict, and the reaction of the American people might have been wholly negative on it and helped advance the cause of Donald Trump in the election. But a wise decision. It's good for the country that this not be forced into the final stages of a presidential campaign.
Karl, Sandra mentioned just a moment ago that we have not heard from the president himself on one of his social media platforms or otherwise on this. The only statement we have is from one of his campaign officials, Stephen Chung, who said there should be no sentencing in the Manhattan DA's election interference witch hunt. It's mandated by the United States Supreme Court. This case, along with all of the others, Harris-Biden hoaxes, should be dismissed. Well, we've been talking with Carrie and Shannon and with Jonathan Turley about this upcoming decision by Judge Mershon on November the 12th as to whether or not he should vacate the conviction because of the Supreme Court decision on immunity. Everybody's thought so far is that the judge will probably not decide in Donald Trump's favor on that point. What do you think?
Oh, I think that's probably likely because the Supreme Court decision had to do with immunity for actions as president. These had to do with actions of the business and going back years before he was president. But look, the bottom line is, as a country, we're better off not having the election look like one side is trying to influence the voters by pressing these legal actions forward. in the closing stages of the campaign. I also think it would be wise if the former president responded to this in a way that kept the focus on the issues that help him in the campaign. That is to say, I'm glad that this issue was removed from the closing days of this campaign so that we can focus on inflation, the border, economy, the issues of the role of America, the position of America, and the respect for America around the world. These are the big issues on which we ought to decide the election, and I'm glad we're going to be able to have a fulsome discussion of it and go after her. Go after her on the issues where he has the lead. She's got the lead on the question of who is a more effective leader and who's the change agent. He has the lead on who's the person who shares your views on these big, important issues.
Also noting, we're talking about the time of the election. This is also happening just days before the big debate happening next Tuesday, which could be obviously very consequential in this election process. Carl.
Absolutely. This is going to be the most important debate, or second most important debate in the history of debates, and the most important debate since the last important debate, which was June 27th, when we saw the absolute demolition of Joe Biden's presidential aspirations. But that's a reminder of how important these debates can be, and this one, which may be the only debate between a candidate we know well and a candidate we don't really know well, could be decisive for either one of them.
Well, we'll see, Carl, if the Trump campaign or the former president takes your suggestion. I think what we should do is we'll make up a graphic of what you said and then compare it to what he says when he eventually comes out with a statement.
Yeah, something tells me there might be a little bit of a difference.
There might be some daylight there. We'll see.
Thanks, Carl.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, let's bring in former federal prosecutor Andrew Cherkasky. Andrew, your thoughts on Judge Merchan's decision? So far, the consensus seems to be that it was the prudent thing for him to do.
This was the obvious answer, but Judge Merchan has repeatedly ruled against Donald Trump. So I think we were all kind of holding our breath to see what would actually happen here. There is way too much to do between now and the actual sentencing date if it were to actually have gone on September 18th. Most specifically, that immunity decision from the Supreme Court had to be litigated in front of the judge, and then the defense, Donald Trump, had the right to then take that up on appeal. So all that could not have happened without kind of firework type litigation before the 18th. So prudent, as well as something that I think takes us away from being the political hot button issue before the election.
To Carl's point about it may be a stunner, but a reasonable decision on the part of this judge, referencing back to the end of the letter in which he announces this news, that this will now be delayed till after Election Day. This is not a decision the court, he says, makes lightly, but is the decision which, in this court's view, best advances the interests of justice. So that, too, will be observed, the sentiment of the judge in this major decision, Andrew.
I think this is one of the things that may be used on appeal to say that Judge Merchan was actually fair and reasonable to Donald Trump, because undoubtedly the defense is going to challenge Judge Merchan's ability to have sat on this case fairly. I think that the timing is also interesting because Judge Merchan was under a very different pressure ahead of the election than he will be after the election. Jonathan Turley was just explaining perhaps this is a path to him finding or reaching a decision that does not have jail time for Donald Trump. I think it could be a signal of the opposite, that trying to jail the president ahead of the election would have been disastrous for the nation at large. But if he waits until after the election, then that becomes more of a viable option for him. I'm not saying that I think that's necessarily going to happen. I'm kind of playing it from both sides of the deck, thinking about what he might be thinking in terms of a final sentence in this case.
So if the former president is elected to a second term, I assume that all of the federal cases will likely go away. But this was a state case, even though it had federal elements to it. So could it still be that if Trump wins the election, he gets sentenced? Or do you think Judge Merchan would look at sort of the overwhelming interests of the country and say to himself, it's not really in anybody's interests for me to be sentencing the president-elect of the United States to jail time, and then the whole thing goes away?
Well, while President Trump, or a sitting president, effectively can't pardon himself from a state-based charge. There is good precedent that says that states can't essentially enact or act upon their criminal law against a sitting president. So while he was in office, I would see that the New York process would totally stop while those 4 years played themselves out. Now, in the short term, I think that's the big question. Does Judge Merchan see a December sentencing, or excuse me, a late November sentencing date as an opportunity to issue a sentence, essentially putting some sort of punishment on the former president ahead of the inauguration? Because obviously during the time between the election and inauguration, he's not actually the president. So perhaps he tries to do something dramatic in those few weeks in between. There's really no saying exactly what he's thinking, other than to say that right now it's on pause. And that's assuming we actually get to sentencing. There's a lot of issues that need to go up through the appellate system before we even get to that sentencing.
Also noting that the AP is mentioning in their latest write-up that a message-seeking comment was left for the Manhattan DA's office, which prosecuted Trump's case. That office has not taken a position on the defense's delay request, deferring to Merchan. So it'd be interesting to get reaction and where they stand on this decision now from the judge, Andrew.
Well, I think that deferral kind of idea, a couple weeks ago, they sent a memo after the defense had asked for this delay, essentially saying that's up to you, Judge. They recognized some of the issues, specifically with regard to the need for appeal prior to sentencing, and that's an open issue. And so I think that was a strong signal from Alvin Bragg that they saw the writing on the wall that this was going to be delayed. They didn't want to come out directly and oppose it. I think that would have been legally kind of difficult for them to do, but they also didn't want to support it or join in the motion because they have this adversarial position. But I think the comment here is very clear from their kind of deferral to the judge as to the delay.
So all of this, Andrew, goes away until after the election. But the one thing that Kamala Harris can still lean in on is the fact that Trump was convicted in the New York case and use that against him all the way through November 5th.
Well, certainly Kamala Harris is going to continue to pound that drum and complain about Donald Trump's prior, I guess, criminal issues that he's had throughout the system. I think that it all kind of boils down to whether it's lawfare or not, and there's strong evidence that it's lawfare. Now, there is going to be still quite a bit of litigation, both in this case as well as the D.C. case between now and the election. More evidence coming out from Jack Smith. Perhaps we see more of the sentencing or the arguments that go into the immunity order in New York. So I think there's still going to be more legal stories coming from this and more kind of data points that come out to the electorate, but not the actual conclusions or finality to it.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Andrew, thank you. Let's bring in Fox News legal editor, Carrie Urban, and chief legal correspondent Shannon Bream. For anybody just tuning in, we have just gotten word through a letter from the judge in this case that he has decided to delay former President Donald Trump's New York criminal trial sentencing in his hush money case till after Election Day. It was set for September. It's now going to be November 26, 10 a.m. And of course, that has big implications, right, Shannon?
It's two days before Thanksgiving as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely does. And this letter from the judge feels like the first time to me that he is acknowledging the public optics of this thing. Because as we all sat through this trial, and Carrie and I were talking here during some of the other commentary too, I mean, there were so many decisions that Merchan made that clearly did not go in President Trump's favor. And the judge did not seem moved at all by the attacks on him that were, this is political in nature, bringing his family into it. I mean, he just plodded forward with the way he was going to handle this case. But this letter and the way that it reads feels like the first time he's acknowledging, okay, there is a political PR optic to this that I've now got to make sure that I can say with a clear conscience, and it looks publicly as if I am not allowing politics to enter into this. He talks about President Trump making unsubstantiated claims, but despite that, I'm going to move forward with this because I think it's the best decision for this case.
You know, Judge Merchan in the letter writes, adjourning decision on the motion and sentencing, if such is required, should dispel any suggestion that the court will have issued any decision or imposed sentence either to give an advantage to or create a disadvantage for any political party and or any candidate for any office. So, you know, you're supposed to separate the judicial system from the political system, but it's quite obvious that while the federal judges in the Trump cases are saying, look, politics is one thing, justice is another, never the twain shall meet. Judge Merchan is obviously taking into consideration the politics of this in making his decisions.
Right, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. And people, I think, sometimes say, oh, well, a judge can't consider this or that. Well, no, wait a second. Judges have a tremendous amount of discretion in when they do things and why they do things. And when you're talking about the former president of the United States and possible future president of the United States, well, that's something to take into consideration because the public interest is at stake. It's what's good for the country as well. You don't want to be cause, say, for some kind of civil war or, something of that magnitude. And I will say where Judge Merchan says about, not taking into consideration, or now he is, this case moved at rapid speed. I mean, typically these cases take years to get through the New York court system. They wanted this very badly to happen before the election. It didn't. And also, and I was saying this to Shannon a bit ago, in the letter, I do detect a bit of annoyance from the judge towards the Supreme Court because he says, notably, had the defendant been sentenced on July 11th as originally scheduled, there would, of course, have been no reason for delay. So I'm sure this is not what he wanted to do, but I don't really think he has a choice considering what his colleagues all around the country are doing at this point.
Interesting, Shannon, thinking back to Karl Rove joining us a short time ago, saying it would be wise of Trump. He was actually talking about what Trump should focus on right now after this decision was made. He thinks it would be wise of him to respond to this and keep focused on the issues that help him. That will be interesting to see how he proceeds and what he does say after this. Still nothing on his Truth Social account, we should add.
Yeah, and think about it, it was just a couple hours ago that he was holding that press conference in New York to respond to this E. Jean Carroll, the appeal on the first case, the $5 million verdict. That appeal of the $83 million case with E. Jean Carroll, that's still ongoing too. But the president was in front of a microphone not long ago talking about how he feels completely persecuted by the judicial system and how he feels like these cases have been political in nature. So that's the tone we've already had from him today, fighting back on the E. Jean Carroll case, at least one of them. So it will be interesting to see what tone he takes with respect to this. This is what his team pushed for and asked for. So you would think they'd want to say, we thank Judge Merchan for making what we feel like is the right decision. Now let's get on to the economy, to the border, all of those things. You got the debate on Tuesday. We know the vice president is hunkered down in Pittsburgh doing traditional debate prep. President Trump says he's in a debate every day. He does hostile interviews. He does press conferences. That's how he's prepping. But even a lot of folks who support him say, let's get to the policy. That's going to be your winning lane. Go there.
Do you think, Carrie, to what Shannon was speaking about a few minutes ago, this takes an arrow out of former President Trump's political quiver here as we head toward the November 5th election, that if there had been a sentence imposed upon him, his supporters will be outraged by that it would have been seen as blatant political interference or judicial interference in the political process. But now that that's not going to happen, Trump will not have that leverage. Again, there were Democrats who would have loved to have run against somebody who was sentenced to something, particularly jail time. But then at the same time, as Shannon was pointing out, that could have also played to Donald Trump's favor.
I do. As unfair as I've thought this whole proceeding has been against Donald Trump, it was remarkable to me to see how much the polls would go up in his favor every time something bad happened, especially in this case. And, given the closeness of the race right now, you can't help but wonder, had he been sentenced and Shannon and I was just discussing this in any way, house arrest, you name it, whatever it was, it's possible that he could have really leveraged that to his advantage because it's only helped him thus far. That being said, it's still the right move in terms of what's best for the country. And we'll certainly see what happens. We're going to have a very interesting November and December, that's for sure.
All right.
To say the least. Well, let's get through September and October first because they're going to be unbelievably
all right.
interesting.
Those 2 months are still coming.
There was never a more accurate prediction, Carrie. Shannon, final thought to you as we are going to work our way to the top of a new hour, and we're also going to have Judge Jeanine coming up live on this to react as you're looking live here in New York City, and we continue to seek reaction from the Trump team, Shannon, to this news of the judge delaying the sentencing in the criminal hush money trial for the former president to after Election Day. Shannon, final thought from you.
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful for him him politically, but legally, all of this stuff may still be waiting for him. As Carrie pointed out, we've talked about, this is a situation where he's not just fighting for his political future, but his legal future, potentially his own freedom. That case, the Mar-a-Lago case that got tossed, the federal case, is on appeal. There's a good chance that case comes back. You've got the other federal case here and many of the others that we've outlined. So I can imagine the president may at some point make that part of his stump speech that this is about a political and legal fight for me. I've got to win this election for many reasons.
Well, he was making that point, as you pointed out, in his Trump Tower press conference a couple of hours ago. He even went back to Judge Engoron's summary decision against him and the, what was it, $400 million fine that was levied against him for allegedly inflating the value of his buildings when seeking loans. So, you know, I think a lot of this, if he becomes president, goes away. Some of it may be waiting for him for after the end of his second term. Too early to know. We got a lot more on this coming for you this afternoon. Here on America Reports, we'll take a quick break and we will be right back. Stay with us.
You know what's crazy?
That this is better than cooking at home? I mean, more affordable than groceries.
Of course.
Good.
Groceries are expensive.
Thought I was in trouble there for a sec.
Oh, you are.
We handcraft every Stearns & Foster using the finest materials like indulgent memory foam and ultra-conforming inner springs for a beautiful mattress and indescribable comfort. Save up to $900 on select adjustable mattress sets at stearnsandfoster.com.
Here's a few things I believe. Middle-class families, like the one I grew up in, they want common sense solutions. You want lower prices and lower taxes. I believe you want to just not get by, but you want to get ahead. We must create an opportunity economy where everyone has a chance to get a car loan, buy a home, start a business. But most of all, that instead of being focused on the politics of the past, we need to be thinking about the future. I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
When was the last time you checked in on your heart?
With
Cardio Mobile, their personal EKG device, you can check it from home using your smartphone.
I use Cardio Mobile every day, sometimes twice a day.
Every morning I check, make sure I'm in good shape, and it makes me feel pretty good about my heart condition.
It's a complete game changer. I mean, you might as well be in a doctor's office.
There's a way that I can communicate with patients now in a way I never could before. They have their own EKG in their pocket.
With Cardio Mobile, you can take a medical-grade EKG in just 30 seconds from anywhere. Cardio Mobile is proven to detect atrial fibrillation, one of the leading causes of stroke. And it's the only personal EKG that's FDA cleared to detect normal heart rhythm, bradycardia, and tachycardia.
Having Cardio Mobile, it's a peace of mind for me.
Because you can't see your cardiologist every day, but you can see your Cardio Mobile every day.
Checking your heart anytime, anywhere has never been easier. And Cardio Mobile is now HSA, FSA eligible. Get Cardio Mobile today for just $79 at cardia.com or Amazon.
Unnecessary action hero. Unnecessary.
Was that necessary?
No. Neither is missing your daughter's competition to do payroll. With Paycom, employees do their own payroll, so you don't have to miss your daughter's big day. Time to shine. Get Paycom and make the unnecessary unnecessary.
A wide leaf filter? It's well designed, efficient. I appreciate that.
Leaf Filter's technology keeps debris out of your gutters for good. Guaranteed.
What more could you ask for?
Call 833-LEAF-FILTER today or visit leaffilter.com.
Rory never thought she would live out her dream. Then one day, she did. You were made to chase your passions. We were made to put them in a package.
If you're feeling out of step with your current big wireless plan, switch to Consumer Cellular. All the dips is the price. Ow, ow, ow. Storn. With plans starting at just $20, it's easy to switch to Consumer Cellular.
With MyQ, home is just a touch away. MyQ is the only smart home security solution that provides video monitoring, real-time notifications, and lets you decide who comes in and who stays out. All in one easy-to-use app.
You know the rule. No phones at the dinner table.
I know, I'm sorry. It's just Noble Gold Investments. I bought some gold for the kids.
Finally.
Well, the gold you bought me gives me so much security in this economic disaster we're having. I want that for them too.
Well,
I've been investing with Noble Gold Investments for years, and I'm pretty sure they can wait until after lunch.
Invest in something you can hold. Invest in Noble Gold. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com to learn more.
Continuing coverage now, the judge in former President Donald Trump's so-called hush money trial deciding to postpone sentencing, which will now take place after the presidential election. And with that, so begins another 60 minutes of a whirlwind of news. I'm John Roberts in Washington. Hang on, Sandra. Buckle up, tighten your belt, whatever.
Never know what you're going to get. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. This is America Reports. The new sentencing date is scheduled now for November 26th, 10 a.m. It had originally been scheduled for later this month, before Election Day.
All right, for the latest on this box of chocolates, let's go to Nate Foy. He's in New York. Nate, what do you got?
Hey, John, so this postponement comes at the request of former President Donald Trump's lawyers, but the Manhattan DA's office did not have an issue with it. You mentioned the new sentencing date, per this letter from Judge Juan Merchan, will now happen after the election on November 26th, and then 2 weeks before that on November 12th. He'll rule on whether or not to throw out the conviction on the grounds of presidential immunity after that Supreme Court decision back in July. Trump, of course, was found guilty of 34 felonies for falsifying business records in an effort to defraud the American public leading up to the 2016 presidential election. He spoke at Trump Tower earlier today. Here's what he said about this case.
That case is a disgrace. Should have never been allowed. I did nothing wrong. And he took a non-existent, expired, long expired by the statute of limitations, misdemeanor. He made it into 34 or something more than that counts of felony. Nobody can even believe it. Over nothing.
Trump later said that his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, should take responsibility for the payments that he facilitated to adult film actress Stormy Daniels as part of that trial. Of course, Cohen was one of the witnesses who testified. Judge Merchan said the reason for the delay is mostly to avoid any appearance of political interference. President Trump has said the case is politically motivated. Judge Merchan said that other sentences are delayed for various personal reasons, and here's what he wrote. Given the unique facts and circumstances of this case, there's no reason why this defendant should be treated any differently than any other. This is not a decision this court makes lightly, but it is a decision which, in this court's view, best advances the interest of justice. Now, also at Trump Tower earlier today, the former president said that all of these cases against him come from the Department of Justice. He believes that they are all politically motivated. He maintains his innocence in this Manhattan criminal case. He faces up to 4 years in prison, although legal experts say that that is unlikely. We'll send it back to you, John.
All right, Nate Foy with the latest for us. Nate, thanks so much. Jonathan Turley joins us again, this time in person. And it's good to see your smiling face there, Professor. So we went over this last hour, but we may have an entirely new audience this hour. So give us your thoughts on the prudence of what the judge did in this case.
Well, it was the right decision because Judge Merchan might have ended up not just the judge who imprisoned Donald Trump. He could have been the judge that reelected Donald Trump. I mean, if he actually did impose jail, as Karl Rove noted, that could have been just the catalyst needed to put Trump over the top. That's an example of how curious this calendar is for any type of sentencing. It also means that because of the dates selected here, that the election is going to have a huge impact on sentencing. If Donald Trump is reelected as president, then it seems very unlikely that Merchan would sentence him to jail. It's also unlikely that he could succeed in keeping him in jail because of the conflict with his presidential duties. If Trump loses the election, then indeed that might make it easier for Merchan to do precisely that. So the election has really grown in considerable importance in terms of this sentencing. But keep in mind, whatever Merchan does, it doesn't change what what he previously did in this case. I think that he has committed layers of reversible error. I think there was evidence at his trial that the Supreme Court would view as privileged and should not have been before the jury. So there is a long runway between here and there when it comes to any jail sentence.
All right, so we are getting a brand new reaction through our own Brooke Singman here, who just spoke to the former president following the judge's decision. He tells her the case was delayed because everyone realizes there was no case and I did nothing wrong, he says. He also adds it is a case that should have never been brought, Jonathan. The public understands that, and so does every legal scholar that has looked at it and studied it. I greatly respect the words "if necessary" being used in the decision because there should be no "if necessary." The case should be dead, says the former president in brand new remarks to Fox. Jonathan?
Well, I certainly agree that this case should never have been brought. I think the former president is correct. This is a political case. It's a case based on rather novel interpretations of the law. I'm not too sure those interpretations will withstand review. But I think that the case is overtly political. It was the weakest of the cases, in my view, to go forward. So I believe the former president is right on that front. The question now is how these appeals will play out. The president has a rather target-rich environment with this trial. There are a lot of things here that I think could be reversible. In some respects, I expect people in the Trump camp almost quietly hoped that Merchan would continue his record in the case. Merchan was quite one-sided in his rulings. I sat in that courtroom and I was astonished by how he consistently ruled against the Trump team, even when, in my view, they were clearly correct in the motions that they were making.
But still, you got a unanimous decision from 12 jurors, maybe not on the underlying predicate crime, but on the overall crime. You got unanimous decision. So, they seem to agree with what the prosecution was selling. So this is off.
Well, I think it's. No, I think it's also important to remember what they rendered their ruling on. I've been critical of the jurors. I'm critical of the judge. He told those jurors that they didn't even have to agree what occurred in the case. He gave them various possible reasons why acts were committed, and he didn't even force them to record how they voted on what really occurred. All of that is part of the novelty, in my view, of this case that should be reviewed.
Yeah, that was the point I was making, that they might not have had unanimity on the underlying predicate crime, but they did on the overall aspect of the case. But you understand politics as well as you understand the law. Now that this is off the table, there will be no sentencing between now and November the 5th. The voting was supposed to start in North Carolina, but because of a lawsuit that Bobby Kennedy has filed to get his name off the ballot, they've delayed sending out those ballots or letting people vote until time to be determined in the future. We don't know when that's going to be. But what do you think now is the overall effect on the election, if there is any at all?
Well, first of all, these ballot fights are rather curious. The Michigan Secretary of State previously tried to get a popular candidate off the ballot, and she's now fighting to keep a non-existent candidate on the ballot because many people view this as a rather political agenda to pull away votes from the former president. In North Carolina, they said they could switch ballots, but it might take a week. Well, they're going to spend more than that in litigation. So there's a lot of question as to why these Democratic secretaries of state are clinging on to Kennedy to keep him on these ballots in very close states. Now, this ruling is going to have an impact in the sense that many people, I think, correctly viewed New York as lawfare, correctly viewed this as a political case. Any sentencing that Merchan would have come down with, I think, would have not been particularly welcome by most of the public. It would have reminded them of this campaign against the former president. So in some ways, I think the Harris campaign is probably celebrating that they won't have that attention on the Manhattan case.
Really something here. Just looking for for more out of the letter itself and the implications for the case going forward. Jonathan, I'm sure you've had a chance to see it by now, but using the words and phrases like wanted to avoid the appearance of, however unwarranted, that proceeding had been, that this had been affected by the election. That's interesting, right? And not like we have heard that from this judge before.
No, I mean, look, I support, was not one of those that was piling on Mershon, but I have to say, after sitting in his courtroom, I was very surprised in what I thought was a one-sided approach to that trial. It reminded me of an old judge who used to say, is the defense ready to present its case, and then say, are the prosecutors ready to present our case? I mean, there was, in my view, a lack of balance there. We have not heard this type of language from Mershon, and he refused to do things during the trial that could have accommodated the environment in which the trial was occurring, including a gag order that I think was excessive. And the irony, of course, was that the former president's polls went up when he was gagged, partially, I think, because people saw the unfairness, partially because he sort of stayed on script. But that may have weighed in all of this. Mershon actually witnessed how his conduct at the trial itself, worked in Trump's favor. That would have been nothing in comparison to what would have happened if he sentenced Trump to home confinement or to jail. I think Mershon was aware of that.
You know, it's funny. So many things have happened since this verdict was handed up that, I mean, this thing has been so far in the rearview mirror that you almost have to remind yourself of what happened during the trial. But here's what a spokesperson for DA Alvin Bragg's office said. A jury of 12 New Yorkers swiftly and unanimously convicted Donald Trump of 34 felony counts. The Manhattan DA's office stands ready for sentencing on the new date set by the court. Of course, the new date is the new date for the moment, but that could change too.
It can, because remember, there are a lot of appeals that are going forward. The Supreme Court's decision on immunity does hit this case. It's true that much of the conduct in this case did not involve the president while he was in office, but some did. In fact, the critical payments that occurred while he was in office. The prosecutors came back to that over and over again about his multitasking, paying these things off while he was president of the United States, the testimony of Hope Hicks. All of that can contaminate the trial. Now, all of our expectation is that Mershon is the least likely judge to say, you know what, I can't really unravel all of that, let's have a new trial. But he's going to have to make a very convincing case for the appellate court because, you know, the Supreme Court made very clear that they wanted breathing room for presidents. They did not want these to be close questions as to when your former aides could pop up in court and testify against you in cases like this.
All right, Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us via phone.
Thanks, Professor.
And then on camera. We appreciate you joining us through the breaking news. Everywhere. All right, thank you. Aisha Hasni now is live in North Carolina. She's covering the Trump campaign. Nothing going on here, Aisha. What is he doing there tonight? And I guess we'll get some more reaction to this breaking news throughout the next few hours.
Sandra, that's right. What a day for the former president who has not yet left New York. He's supposed to come down here to Charlotte to speak to the FOP here. They're having their annual fall meeting, and I imagine that he's going to come here feeling pretty good, but those remarks have been delayed a little bit, sliding a little bit in their timing. I have to tell you, he's coming to North Carolina, obviously leaving New York with some good news in his hands, but also coming here to receive some good news. And that is because of a major development in the ballot battle with RFK Jr. I can tell you that a Court of Appeals just in the last couple of hours here ruled that these ballots that have RFK Jr.'s name on them, they cannot go out in this state as was planned to happen today. The first in the nation ballots, they are not allowed to go out anymore. And that is going to stay in effect until his appeal is resolved. In fact, this case is now being sent back to the Superior Court for them to order the State Board of Elections to basically send out the ballots without his name on them. So now they have to decide Are they going to reprint these ballots, all 2.9 million of them, or are they going to try to appeal this decision? And that's going to take some time, too. It's a dramatic turn from where we were at 24 hours ago when the Superior Court judge had ruled that his name had to stay on the ballot. And it is a big win for the former president because, of course, he is courting RFK Jr.'s voters. RFK Jr. out there today now telling his supporters to vote for Donald Trump, no matter what state you're in, no matter what's going on with the ballots, just vote for Trump. And he's hoping to pull in those supporters. And Trump just spoke in New York City and actually addressed the upcoming debate as well. Listen to this.
I'm going into very hostile territory shortly on a debate with ABC. The reason I'm doing it is because that's the only one that she would do it with.
So we are again checking in with the campaign on the timing of these remarks here in Charlotte. They're supposed to happen around the 4 o'clock hour, but we're being told that those remarks will be moved a little bit later, again, because of everything that's happening in New York. And then we'll see if the president addresses what just happened in New York and the ballot win for RFK Jr. here in this state. A major development. Sandra?
All right, and there will be more. Aisha Hasni, thank you.
Many twists and turns. The father of the Georgia high school shooting suspect now facing charges himself. Is there a legal case against him? We will ask criminal defense attorney Mark Eiglarsh coming up. Stay with us.
My late father-in-law lit up a room, but his vision dimmed with age. He had AMD. I didn't know it then, but it can progress to GA, an advanced form of the disease. His struggle with vision loss from AMD made me want to help you see warning signs of GA, like hazy or blurred vision, so it's hard to see fine details. Colors that appear dull or washed out. Or trouble with low light. That makes driving at night a real challenge. If you think you have GA, don't wait. Treatments are available. Ask a retina specialist about FDA-approved treatments for GA and go to GAWon'tWait.com.
Here we go. Consumer Cellular uses the same towers as Big Wireless, but then passes the savings on to you. Save your money for something else. Speaking of, I ordered us some Thai food. For unlimited talk and text with reliable coverage starting at just $20, call Consumer Cellular.
Clogged gutters can cause big problems fast. Until now. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER today for your free gutter inspection.
I've had terrible flooding problems on my porch. Now I understand why.
Right now, LEAF-FILTER is offering a free inspection on your schedule. LEAF-FILTER is a permanent gutter solution, so you never have to worry about costly damage from clogged gutters again.
Call us today and schedule your free inspection.
To schedule your free inspection, call 833-LEAF-FILTER today or visit leaffilter.com.
He was only 47. Aneurysm. Did he have life insurance? Do you? No. You got to get on it. Check out SelectQuote. Trust me, the peace of mind, it's worth it.
Life insurance is too important to put off another day. That's why SelectQuote makes getting coverage you need easy for less than $1 a day. Now get up to a $2 million policy with no medical exam and same-day coverage.
Visit or call SelectQuote. We shop, you save.
Psoriasis all over. I couldn't get my hair done.
Then psoriatic arthritis. Cosentyx works on both for me.
People with psoriasis on the scalp have a 4 times higher risk for psoriatic arthritis. Serious allergic reactions, severe skin reactions that look like eczema, and an increased risk of infections, some fatal, have occurred. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, had a vaccine or plan to, or if IBD symptoms develop or worsen.
Still working for me.
Zeroing in on economic policy. How will the candidates' plans address high costs? And whose message are Americans buying more? Must see inside Saturday on Cavuto Live.
For underarms and body owners everywhere, try Native Whole Body Deodorant. You can use it there, and there.
The Tempur-Pedic Breeze makes sleep feel cool. So no more sweating all night or blasting the air conditioning, because the Tempur Breeze feels up to 10 degrees cooler all night long. Don't miss our biggest sale of the year with savings up to $700 on select adjustable mattress sets.
The first presidential debate, second time around, is just around the corner, and early voting begins in just days for a handful of key states. It was supposed to start today in North Carolina. But Vice President Kamala Harris's policy stances are still changing, and voters say it's frustrating that she is not explaining more. Let's bring in our panel. Antoine Seawright is a former South Carolina senior advisor to Hillary Clinton, and Kaylee McGee-White is a Blankley Fellow at the Steamboat Institute. Let's get, first of all, Kaylee, your reaction to Judge Merchan's decision to postpone sentencing until well after the election.
Yeah, well, you know, forgive me, but I don't really believe his sudden concern for how charging a current presidential candidate on legally spurious grounds might affect the electoral process. He's behaved as a rabid partisan throughout this trial, and I think it's very likely that Merchan does want to sentence Donald Trump to prison. However, he more than likely realizes that if he were to send Donald Trump to a jail cell, he might very well also send him back to the White House. I think that this is a political decision. However, it might also be the best one for the country, given the stakes at large.
Antoine?
Well, I can just say that the rule of law prevailed in the Trump case, 34 convictions, unanimous. And so the rule of law prevailed. However, I do think at the end of the day in this country, we settle our differences and our disputes politically at the ballot box. The court system will have its day. Delayed does not mean denied. So Trump will have to face the court system in this country. We will see what that outcome may be. But politically, those two things are not connected. And I do believe that the American people will decide ultimately who the next leader of the free world is and what that looks like at the ballot box.
So in that front, the two leaders the two candidates at least, are going to face off against each other next Tuesday. In the first debate, the delay in voting in North Carolina means that people might not have cast any ballots by the time that the two candidates hit the stage. It seems to me that Kamala Harris is putting a lot of chips on this debate because she hasn't explained a lot about her policies, in particular her flip-flops, including this one from 2019. She said she wanted to ban plastic straws. Listen here.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. It's really difficult to drink out of a paper straw when if you don't gulp it down immediately, it starts to bend. Yes. and then, you know, the little thing catches it. And then, you know, so we got to kind of perfect that one a little bit more. I think we could do a little bit better than some of those flimsy plastic straws. But we do need to ban the plastic.
All right, so maybe plastic straws is a minor issue, an election full of big issues, but it is another flip-flop, Kaylee, and her lack of interviews and news conferences is going to put a lot more focus on her policies because they're so unknown at this point when she gets to the debate stage next Tuesday.
Well, and that's the key issue here. It's not just that she's flip-flopping on these issues. It's that no one knows what she's flopping to. On fracking, for example, she said that she no longer supports banning fracking. Well, then what is her position? Does she want to phase it out? Does she actually plan to encourage continued fracking? And then here's my favorite example. Politico asked her campaign what her current position is on reparations. Because remember, back when she was a presidential candidate, she said she supported having a conversation about a national reparations package. They responded that they simply weren't going to comment on that issue anymore. This is deeply unfair to the American public. They deserve answers. They deserve to know where specifically she stands right now.
You know, when you take a look at just the flip-flops, Antoine, plastic straw ban, EV mandate, border wall, decriminalizing border crossings, Medicare for all, mandatory gun buybacks, fracking, offshore drilling, that's a lot of questions that will be aimed her way on Tuesday.
Well, I'm confident she will be able to clarify her position on all the issues, and certainly my Republican friends cannot talk about flip-flopping when America's new political duo, Flip and Flop, Trump and Vance, are the two leaders of their party running for the running for the presidency. However, I do believe that Americans will not vote on things like a person's position on straws, but issues like when it comes to mass shootings in this country, when you have one candidate who says we need to deal with gun violence in an authentic way, and the other one says it's a part of life, or as Trump said in Iowa to a group of people, we have to deal with it. Or when we talk about issues
Antoine,
that
that's
matter,
not the
when we talk about
context
issues that
of
will
what
put
J.D.
the
Vance
American
said,
people,
and you know it.
The American people will go to the ballot box and decide on, like reproductive freedom, like IVF, where J.D. Vance voted against the opportunity in the United States Senate, where Donald Trump was on record saying that women should be criminalized for abortion.
These are not the top issues for voters.
The American people will ultimately make their decision
we're running
about
out of
this
time.
election and the candidates on.
Okay. All right. Let's let Kaylee get in here. And again, you know that's not the context of what J.D. Vance said. Kaylee, go ahead.
These are not the top issues for voters. Every single one of these polls lists inflation, lists the economy, lists immigration as voters' top concerns. And the fact is that Kamala Harris has not specified what her positions on these key issues are.
Excuse me. She's speaking. She's speaking. She's speaking, Antoine.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kaylee.
Well,
go ahead, Antoine.
Well, if you're telling me that reproductive freedom is not a top issue, I'm not sure what you're reading, what polls you're reading. And certainly when we talk about the economy, when we talk about the economy and the two economic plans that have been rolled out, I'll certainly take the bipartisan support that came with Vice President Harris' small business rollout yesterday versus Donald Trump's incoherent message on his economic plan that he spoke about yesterday. When we talk about housing, economic issue, economic plan rolled out by Vice President Harris, we have not heard anything on the issue from former President Trump. So I'm happy to have the discussion on the economic issues or any other issues, and the debate will allow that opportunity to happen.
Well, Antoine, we're all waiting for the opportunity to read about Kamala Harris's economic plan and other things on her website, should she ever decide to put them up.
You're back to the website conversation.
Yeah, like I said, since forever, people have cared about putting policies on campaign websites. People like to read things.
And the American people are responding. $316 million raised this month.
I'm calling the end of this. Thank you, folks. Really appreciate it. We'll see you again soon. Sandra?
All right, John, the city of Dallas mourning the death of a police officer who was shot and killed in the line of duty. What we are now learning about all of it, that will be next.
I'd like to take a moment to address my fellow veterans, because I know so many of you have served our country honorably. One of the benefits that we as a country give you as a veteran is the eligibility for a VA loan for up to 100% of your home's value. If you need cash for your family, call New Day USA. With automatic authority from the VA, we can say yes when banks say no. Give us a call.
Call 1-844-383-1541.
Hi, I'm Sally. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a flight nurse on a helicopter that specializes in trauma. I've been doing flight nursing for 24 years. I had a fear that I wouldn't be able to keep up. I wanted all the boost I could get. I heard about Prevagen from a friend. I read the clinical study on it, and it had good reviews. I've been taking Prevagen now for 5 years, and it's really helped me stay sharp and present. It's really worked for me.
Prevagen, at stores everywhere without a prescription.
Upset stomach? Iberogast. Indigestion? Iberogast. Bloating? Iberogast. Thanks to a unique combination of herbs, Iberogast helps relieve 6 digestive symptoms to help you feel better. 6 digestive symptoms, the power of nature. Iberogast.
It's Pod's biggest sale of the summer. Save up to 25% on moving and storage for a limited time. And see why Pods has been trusted with over 6 million moves. But don't wait. Use promo code BIG25 to save. Visit pods.com today.
When your kid is hurting and there's nothing you can do about it, that's the worst feeling in the world.
I don't think anybody ever expects to hear that their child has cancer. It's always one of those things that happens to somebody else, but it's definitely feels like your soul is sucked out of your body when they tell you that it's your baby. And you would do anything to get them to the best place that they can be for their treatment. And I knew with everything in my soul that that was St. Jude and that we had to get here.
Join the battle to save lives during Childhood Cancer Awareness Month by supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Please call or go online right now and become a St. Jude Partner in Hope for only $19 a month.
My name is Hunter. I'm at St. Jude because I had osteosarcoma. Osteosarcoma is a special cancer that's in the bone, so they had to amputate my leg.
Good catch. My hero.
Here at St. Jude, you don't ever have to worry about how much treatment costs. You never get a bill, ever, for any of it.
This September, When you call or go online with your credit or debit card, you will receive this St. Jude t-shirt you can wear to show your support to help St. Jude save the lives of these children.
Without the donors, St. Jude wouldn't be here.
Thank you so much. You have saved so many kids.
Let's cure childhood cancer together.
Growing up in the 90s, I never thought much about race.
What's happening in this country, it's Nazism. Republicans are Nazis.
I'm going to sort this out. I need to go deeper undercover.
They gon' say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certification. What's up with white people? What are you doing to decenter your whiteness?
Who's making it the center? Why are they doing that?
And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you and less for you.
They gon' say you racist.
Am I Racist? Rated PG-13. Buy tickets now.
The city of Dallas mourning the death of a police officer who was shot and killed on duty. Police say Officer Darren Burks was executed last week while he was sitting in his patrol car. The suspect was killed in a shootout with responding officers. Brooke Taylor is live in Dallas. She's been following this. And Brooke, this is part of a larger issue of targeted attacks on police officers. What have local leaders been telling you?
Yeah, John, this is the 32nd officer to be intentionally killed just this year. Now, the local union president here calling this an all-out raging war on cops. And, you know, he says that our leadership has to do more to protect officers. Officer Darren Brooks recently left his job as a math teacher and coach to become an officer to serve his community. He was murdered less than a year on the job. Now, police say Brooks was just sitting in his marked patrol car last Thursday when the shooter, Corey Cobby, went up to him. He pulled out a handgun and then killed him. The Dallas police chief says this was a targeted execution. Take a look at this dash cam footage, just shocking, showing the last encounter between the shooter and police. He led them on a 25-mile chase, then stopped in the middle of a busy freeway, walks toward those officers, a shotgun in his hand. The officers yelling at him to drop the gun. He doesn't listen, and then he is shot and killed. President of the Dallas Police Chief Association tells us, you know, this is a perfect example of why so many people just don't want to become officers anymore, and nationwide staffing shortages are devastating our police forces.
These young officers, when they're arriving to those scenes, they're responding to scenes of war. That is not normal. You know, the days of these simple 911 calls, you know, loud music, you know, a family distress, those days are gone. We are responding to acts of war.
And back here out live, a growing memorial for Officer Burke on this patrol car with dozens of flowers and balloons, all in honor of him. His funeral is going to be held tomorrow, John.
Brooke, thank you so much. And Brooke, it's tragedy that has brought us together today, but we wanted to welcome you to the Fox family. It was good meeting you in Washington, D.C. the other day. We'll be seeing a lot more of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John. I'm excited to be here and important stories like this that we get to tell our viewers. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely they are. Thank you again, Brooke. Brooke Taylor for us. Sandra?
All right, and we are 60 days now from Election Day, and some states are purging their voter rolls in preparation. At least 3 states say they have removed thousands of non-citizens, and some question how they got on voter polls in the first place, voter rolls, I should say. Alexandria Hoff is live on this in Washington for us. So, Alexandria, do we know if any of these non-citizens were actually able to cast their ballots?
Well, Sandra, in Texas, for example, about 6,500 non-citizens were found on the voter roll, and of that number, 1,900 appear to have voted before. Ohio Secretary of State said that they found 138 who appear to have already cast a ballot in that state. Here's Chad Ennis. He's the vice president of the Honest Elections Project, weighing in.
Those are real numbers that may not affect a presidential race, but can certainly affect a city council race, school board race, a mayor's race, and those races are just as important to your everyday life than federal races. So to say, oh, it doesn't affect an election, I think is silly because it certainly probably has.
And remember, there are some Democrats who have said that this simply doesn't happen, but some do argue that the numbers prove there has been no large-scale voter fraud.
You're talking about less than 0.5% of the 1.1 million records that were purged, and less than 1/1000% with any actually voting history at all.
Now in Alabama, 3,200 suspected non-citizens were removed from their voter list. In Virginia, it was 6,000. We don't know how many had voting history there. But how does this happen? Well, one theory points to how nearly half of U.S. states allow undocumented citizens to obtain driver's licenses. And the map you're looking at there, that's the 25 states that have automatic voter registration when you interact with the DMV.
There may be training or a lack of refresher training for individuals who work at the driver's license agencies that non-citizens are not permitted to vote, or the software is not working properly. So when the individual tries to register, it doesn't stop them from registering to vote.
That is just one theory. But this week, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin signed an executive order requiring the DMV to notify the Department of Elections if a driver is not a legal citizen. Sandra?
Alexandria Huff on that for us. Alex, thank you. John?
Sandra, Hunter Biden pleading guilty in his federal tax case, but what pardoning him? Peter Ducey reports from the North Lawn, coming up next.
When our country used to flex its muscle with battleships like the USS Iowa, the world would listen. It's time we return to the America I remember. Hi, I'm William Devane. There are dangerous forces everywhere pulling our country apart, threatening our economy and our way of life. That's why I'm going to do two things: support our military and buy gold from Roslyn Capital. I've never felt safe relying on paper money to protect my assets. That's why I buy gold from Roslyn. With Roslyn, what you order is what you get. No gimmicks, no nonsense, no hassle. We're all safer with our ships patrolling the seas. And my assets are a whole lot safer with gold from Roslyn Capital. So ask yourself, are you safe?
Call now to get your free gold, silver, and IRA kits. For a limited time, Roslyn is offering up to $15,000 in free gold to qualifying new customers. Call 800-630-8900. That's 800-630-8900.
At Talented Towers, we have made a commitment. That commitment is to make sure that the word homeless and the word veteran are never in the same sentence again.
We're in Bradenton right now because Tunnel to Towers has decided to help homeless veterans who want to get out of homelessness get into a better part of their life.
It's a great partnership between the Tunnel to Towers and Manatee County to be able to provide housing for the veterans that need it most.
Not shelter, home. It's not just a place to sleep. It's actually wraparound services, and that's what's so impressive.
As someone who fought on the forward edge of freedom, these are my people. These are my brothers, my sisters, the people we fought beside. One of the hallmarks of military service is we don't leave people behind. That sticks with me.
I know that every veteran who raised their right hand and swore to support and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, we have things that we carry inside of us. What Tunnel to Towers is doing with this village is helping veterans that have mental health issues, needs.
We have veterans that suffer every day, and so to be able to have this facility to service our veterans that are in so need, it's just, the pride is just exploding.
We want to make sure that when our veterans are coming home, that they're coming home to something that actually feels personalized and you know, homey for them.
That's a home. That's a home with dignity and walls and air conditioning. It's beautiful.
I was able to walk through one of the comfort homes today. That moved my heart. I'm just telling you, it did when I walked in. And it'll help the heart of that veteran. That's what's important.
The care and the give and the love that Tunnel to Towers has for our veterans is amazing. The people that donate to Tunnel to Towers are amazing.
So that $11 is changing your life because you're giving, and it's changing somebody else's to do it. And it's just an honor to be involved in that.
This is all that is good in America, and I am incredibly proud to stand with them. They matter, they save lives, you should support them.
You watching my special, aren't you?
No, I just got this great NFL offer. Guaranteed, all up front. And this one's gonna be hard to pass up.
Breaking news, LeBron James has a guaranteed NFL offer. He says it's, quote, going to be hard to pass up.
Seriously? Ooh, somebody got to call a plumber, because you got a leak.
With DraftKings, new customers bet $5 to get $250 instantly in bonus bets and a month of NFL Plus Premium. The crown is yours.
I've been having UTIs for 10 years. I felt a loss of control.
Eucora helped me get back on track.
At Eucora, we make UTI relief products. We also make proactive urinary tract health products. Eucora is a lifesaver. Try today at eucora.com.
People diagnosed with mesothelioma have many questions. That's why we've offered a free book about mesothelioma for over 10 years. Mesothelioma is really all we do.
Call 800-500-5202 or go to mesobook.com.
When you can't watch, listen. Get the latest news, business, and news headlines on SiriusXM. Anytime, anywhere. Fox News Audio on SiriusXM. America is listening.
All right, the suspect in the deadly Georgia high school shooting was in court for the first time. It happened earlier today. He is charged with 4 counts of murder. Then just moments later, his father sat in front of a judge after being arrested for, quote, knowingly allowing his son to possess a weapon. He's been charged with second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and cruelty to children. Let's bring in Mark Eiglarsh now, criminal defense attorney. And Colin Gray has his mugshot now after his son facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of second-degree murder, 8 counts of cruelty to children, Mark. Had he not provided this to his son, would we be looking at a much different situation, Mark?
Of course, but let's make it clear, providing the gun is insufficient, and that's not even what they're alleging. They're going one step further. The arrest warrant alleges not only did he provide the firearm, but also that he knew that his son was a threat to himself and others. Not should have known, not it was reasonably foreseeable, but he knew. So the facts have to justify that.
Okay. So here is the DA, Brad Smith, on the charges for the parent, because obviously this is a very particular instance where this is happening. Mark, listen.
How unprecedented is it to charge a parent in connection to a shooting?
My understanding is this is the second time in the United States and the first time in Georgia.
And do you think that we're going to continue to see this trend of holding parents accountable?
I would hope that prosecutors would use every arsenal or every tool in their arsenal to hold people accountable for crimes that they commit.
So, Mark, that last response was to the question, do you think that it's going to continue, this trend where parents are held responsible? Let me rephrase that question to you. Should we see more of that trend continue? Should parents be held more responsible for the actions of their children?
Yes, when the facts are clearly egregious. What I take exception to is parents being mind readers, and when their son or daughter looks a little disturbed, but there's nothing more, they're supposed to know that they're going to be carrying out some abhorrent act at a school. This better be different. In other words, there better be facts that lead us to the conclusion that, oh yeah, what sane person would give their son a gun under these circumstances? I don't know. I mean, we've got allegations that the son did allegedly post on social media that he was going to threaten to shoot up a school. But then the FBI intervened, and the FBI didn't bring charges. And so the father's going to say, I didn't think there was anything to it. My son denied it. I don't think he did it. So what more do they have is the question.
There is obviously also cases you can look at as examples for how this case is being treated. Ethan Crumbley, who was sentenced to life in prison without parole for killing 4 students in that Michigan school shooting. This was the prosecutor in the Crumbley case yesterday reacting to this school shooting in Georgia.
Certainly when you have a 14-year-old who cannot drive and cannot purchase a weapon like that, and dad reportedly was on notice that there was a concern, and reportedly also said that the minor did not have any access to weapons. That was a year prior. It would be hard to argue that dad didn't know that.
Agree, Mark?
Yeah, the Crumbley case clearly not only set the precedent, but the expectation now where victims expect prosecutors to bring charges, and if they don't, they're going to vote them out of office. So you're going to see this. The similarity between the Crumbley case, though, assuming what we're hearing is true, is that the aunt in this case alleges that this shooter in Georgia begged for mental health treatment, and those cries were ignored. We saw that in the Crumbley case. The difference in the Crumbley case, though, is there were drawings showing that he wanted to be a shooter. It was very clear. Let's see if they've got those same facts here.
All right. Mark, thank you for joining us on this. We will obviously see where it all goes. Just absolutely tragic and horrific situation all around for all involved.
That it is.
Mark, thank you.
My pleasure, Sandra.
Mr. President, are you going to watch the Harris-Trump debate there next week?
President Biden ignoring shouted questions about whether he would pardon his son Hunter after his son's last-minute decision to plead guilty to all charges in his federal tax case. Now the big question, will President Biden step in and pardon him or commute his sentence? Peter Ducey is live at the White House with the latest. Peter, there seemed to be, to a person, a consensus among our legal analysts that while the president continues to publicly say he wouldn't pardon him, at some point the president whispered in Hunter's ear that he would do it. What are you hearing there?
That may be, John, but what we're hearing here, in addition to the silence over today, over the last couple months, the official line is that President Biden would rather let his son just rot in jail, if that's what the sentence is, instead of use the pardon power while he has it.
Will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
Hasn't changed. Hunter's going to be sentenced in December, and he says, I will not subject my family to more pain, more invasions of privacy, and needless embarrassment. For all I have put them through over the years, I can spare them this, and so I have decided to plead guilty. And White House officials this week are warning of Russian disinformation in the upcoming election. It's worth pointing out, the official White House line has been and still is that Hunter's infamous laptop is Russian disinformation.
I still think that the stories from the fall about your son Hunter were Russian disinformation at his smear campaign, like you said.
Yes. God love you, man. You're a one-horse pony. I promise you, my Justice Department will be totally on its own, making its judgments about how they should proceed.
And again, it's worth pointing out that while President Biden and his team insist he will not pardon his son, he will not commute the sentence, he also told us this summer he wasn't going to drop out of the race, but he did. John.
You are a two-horse pony in anybody's books, not a one-horse pony. Maybe multiple horses.
Thank you, John.
Peter, thank you so much.
Whole stable.
Appreciate it. An entire stable.
Genius.
Entire state of Kentucky. Sandra?
All right, you two. Former President Donald Trump vowing to hold the government fiscally accountable and says Elon Musk will lead the operation. So how would he do that? That is next.
You've had thyroid eye disease for a long time, and you've lived with the damage it caused. But even after all these years, restoration is still possible. Learn how at TEDhelp.com.
Life, diabetes, there's no slowing down. Each day is a unique blend of people to see and things to do. That's why you choose Glucerna to help manage blood sugar response. Uniquely designed with Carb Steady. Glucerna, bring on the day.
Look out, 'cause here I come.
Have you always had trouble losing weight and keeping it off? Same.
Discover the power of Wegovy.
And I'm marching on to the beat I drum.
With Wegovy, I lost 35 pounds. And some lost over 46 pounds.
Wegovy.
And I'm keeping the weight off.
Wegovy helps you lose weight and keep it off.
I'm reducing my risk.
Wegovy is the only FDA-approved weight management medicine that's proven to reduce risk of major cardiovascular events in adults with known heart disease and with either obesity or overweight.
Wegovy shouldn't be used with semaglutide or GLP-1 medicines. Don't take Wegovy if you or your family had medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if allergic to it. Stop Wegovy and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, or an allergic reaction. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis and gallbladder problems. Wegovy may cause low blood sugar in people with diabetes, especially if you take medicines to treat diabetes. Tell your provider about vision problems or changes, or if you feel your heart racing while at rest. Depression or thoughts of suicide may occur. Call your provider right away if you have any mental changes. Common side effects like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea may lead to dehydration, which may cause kidney problems.
With Wegovy,
I'm losing weight.
I'm keeping it off.
And I'm lowering my CV risk.
That's the power of winning. Wegovy.
Check your cost and coverage before talking to your healthcare professional about Wegovy.
Taking on New York City's migrant crime. How should lawmakers handle the crisis? Councilman Joe Borelli and Kalman Yeager join Brett as they look for common ground. Tonight on Special Report.
Only Sargento 100% real natural cheese slices belong on your kids' grilled cheese.
Make crunch time a good thing.
The Ergo Smart Base from Tempur-Pedic automatically responds to snoring, so no more hiding under your pillow because this system actually detects snoring, then adjusts to help reduce it. Don't miss our biggest sale of the year with savings up to $700 on select adjustable mattress sets.
Well, that's one share out today. Be back here at 5. Thanks.